Good afternoon. My name is Mike James. I'm with the City of Shafter, Public Works Department. I've been employed with the city approximately 18 of the 20 years at high school working as an engineer. I am the Public Works Director. I oversee the Public Works Department on behalf of the city. It's a department made up of approximately 30 full-time employees, including myself. Most of the employees are laborers, equipment operators, and technicians. Guys who basically wear the orange shirts, but we're also staffed with engineers at City Hall, and together we basically make sure that public infrastructure in the city is designed, built, operated, and maintained properly. And in order to do that, it costs the city several $million every year. It's here to present some background on what I do and what I work on, maybe to facilitate what you guys are working on. Public Works is made up of several divisions. We have streets, as you might suspect, wastewater. We even have a fiber optic network that we maintain and a railroad system, which is pretty cool. But by far, the most important utility, the most important service we provide is water service. As you can imagine, it's because it affects public health and safety. But it's also the most expansive service we provide, and by expansive, I'm just talking about the overall water footprint within the city. I'm just providing this map to kind of give you a spatial representation of just how large our water footprint is. Right in here where this little cluster is, I mean, that's what most people associate with Shafter. That's where all of our 17,000 residents are. That's where all of our groundwater wells are at. But in reality, we extend as far south as 7th Standard Road, where the Target warehouse is at, and we extend as far east as Highway 99. In fact, we just got past Highway 99 here within the last 5 years or so. Just to kind of give you some general statistics, within the city service area, which is highlighted in blue here, we have 4,200 service connections. Now when you factor in apartments and multifamily dwellings, that's 5,000 plus units that we serve, which includes houses, apartments, and businesses. And everyone combined consumes an average of 4 million gallons per day over the course of a year. And that translates to 1.6 billion gallons of water every year. Now, the 70% of our water is consumed by residents, and each residence will consume 700 to 800 gallons per day. And that's mostly more than 50% for outdoor irrigation and watering. So as you can imagine, in the summertime is when we see our peak usage. And 4 million becomes 8 million gallons per day. So there's a factor of 2 for our peak usage. So just to kind of give you some more statistics, within this blue highlighted area, there's 80 miles of pipeline that we operate and maintain. The supply that feeds that water system comes from 6 active wells in the core city right now. And we're about ready to add a 7th well near the general headquarters. So this footprint, I haven't provided the exact breakdown of what service areas we have, but we have East Shafter here, which is Minter Field. We have Southeast Shafter, which is the logistics park and the warehouses we have down there. We have North Park, and we extend as far west as Maple School. And then in South Shafter, we have our outlying unincorporated communities of Cherokee Strip and I think the Mexican Colony. About 1,500 individuals that aren't inside the city that we serve as well. And then we have what I refer to as the core city, which is where we're at right now. So the basic objective of a water system is to meet demand and to satisfy water quality standards. And for the past several decades, meeting demand was never really an issue because there was an abundant supply. But as you can imagine, with the drought and the state's insistence on overcommitting the supplies that we have, that supply has dwindled and has become more and more of an issue. The drought alone, as I'm sure you know, has prompted the state to enforce mandatory conservation. And for those of us on the south end of the valley, we're expected to conserve 36%. And I don't think there's really any water system in our area that's even come close to that. We're at 25%. And with a very limited surface supply now, everyone's pumping water out of the groundwater. And so what happens is that water table becomes lower and lower. And that affects us because with the lower water table, you have less water coming out of a well. So those wells have to work that much harder just to meet demand that's out there in the system. And here recently, in the last year or two, some of these older outlying communities that aren't in the city, their wells have gone completely dry. And that's put a burden on the city, not so much from a financial standpoint, but just on the staffing part. I spend quite a bit of my time trying to work with each one of these outlying systems and private residences to get access to city water. Some can't afford it, and they're literally filling up a water truck at a city hydrant and trucking it over to their house once or twice a week, just because of the financial burden connecting puts on them. So in order to make sure we have enough of a supply, we're really ramping up the metering efforts. And you might be surprised to know that only a third of our customer base is metered. And prior to the drought, the state was already requiring the city to become fully metered by 2025. And given the drought and our inability to meet the conservation mandate, we're obviously going to ramp it up a little bit. Probably have that in much sooner. But without a fully metered system, it's really hard to get conservation out of your customers who are on flat rates, because how can you conserve when you don't know how much you're already using? And you certainly don't have a financial incentive to conserve if you're not on a metered bill. Meeting water quality standards is increasingly difficult here in recent years. You'd be surprised to know this, but your water supply does have contaminants. All water supplies have contaminants. The state and federal government tell the city and other permitted water departments what safe levels are. And to date, we're only required to treat our water system with disinfection to remove bacteria. Once the bacteria has been taken care of, we need to maintain what's called a residual chlorine. So if you've noticed, when you drink a bottle of tap water, there's that lingering chlorine taste, and that's by design, because you have to have contact time for chlorine to address any bacteria that is in the line from point A to point B. Point A being the well, and point B being the tap. As far as the actual testing we do, we test at all of our wells, and we literally analyze for hundreds of contaminants every year. We analyze for primary standards, which basically means things that affect public health, and secondary standards that don't necessarily affect your health, but it affects your overall perspective on the water quality, such as taste and odor. Now, as I mentioned, we only chlorinate, and once we're in the system, throughout the system, we have several dozen sampling collection points that we analyze to make sure we're maintaining a chlorine residual, and we make sure that there isn't bacteria in the line. But beyond chlorination, we do have planned treatment to remove an organic contaminant that's in Shafter's water, and it's up and down the valley, that was left over from agricultural spraying that has since ceased, but it's going to be lingering in our groundwater for years to come. And rather than wait for the state to tell us what they think is a safe level of this contaminant, we're going ahead with plans to install treatment to fully remove that contaminant in the next few years. And of course, just in general, there's just man-made and naturally occurring contaminants that we're always on the lookout for. And here in this area, that mostly includes arsenic and nitrates. Most people, when they think public works, they don't necessarily think about fire prevention. But in order for the fire department to access the hydrant and get enough flow out of that hydrant, the water system itself has to be properly designed and operated. And our water system, the size of our water system, whether it's a pipe, a pump, or a water tank, it has fire flow in mind. If we didn't have to meet fire flow, everything would be half the size you see now. And that's really good. Each hydrant has to maintain a flow of 2,000 gallons per minute for a period of 2 hours in order to properly to extinguish a fire. So in addition to making sure that everything's built, we have to regularly test it, with the county fire department staff. Just also here in the last few years, our water crews have been anyone that's from the top all the way to the bottom, from the people that manage the crews to the people that are in the trenches, have to be certified by the state to operate and treat a water system. And that's something that we're constantly working on to make sure our crews are properly trained on how to operate a system. And then finally, a really important aspect to